Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 198 of Manage the Wild. I'm your host, Nick Madsen. The city of Pittsburgh is facing a problem that all areas are facing at one point or another, and that's to do with wildlife. What do you do when a population of deer, elk, moose, whatever it may be, moves into your area that you're ill equipped to handle? They have two different parks. One is 600 and almost 50 acres. The other is 250 acres. And they are full of whitetail. And there are multiple options that the cities usually employ when they have parks like this and whitetail move in. Often the challenge is, how do you get rid of them? How do you reduce the population? And oftentimes as these deer get near people, they become more and more aggressive. They figure out that people are not a threat to them, and people will also feed them. And so they actually become very aggressive in getting people to feed them. And then the males during the rut will oftentimes become aggressive towards people as well, thinking that they might potentially be competition. And so the city of Pittsburgh has decided, out of all the different options, that they're going to select 30 different archers. And they are offering 30 archery tags, and they're going to do a lottery system within the park. They're going to require people to take an accuracy course to verify, once they've drawn, that they can actually hit what they are aiming at. Oftentimes, this is the last scenario that they go for. There's a whole host of other methods. Some of the times when this method is employed, they often ask the state themselves to go in and remove. If the state doesn't want to come in and remove the wildlife, then they may offer a contract out to people to go in and remove them through a company, and then there is this option. The challenge you've got is with an archery tag, that once a deer is shot with an arrow, oftentimes they run, and depending on where these archers are going to be hunting from, it can end up outside the park, and that just creates problems. I found myself working in an urban area that was doing deer removals, and they paid for the animal control officers to go around and remove these unwanted deer. They were mostly targeting females, obviously. Bucks, they're not really going to add to the population, so they were trying to go after females. This female was shot. The officer used a suppressed shotgun, shot the deer, and it took off running. And by the time it died, because of adrenaline, it laid down on the porch of a house and just bled all over the porch. The lady opens up the door, starts screaming because she sees basically what she thought was a gutted deer laying on her door. And then it got even worse, because then her kids wanted to come out and see it, and they started crying. And the officer, he quickly grabbed the deer and drug it towards his truck, but by then all the damage was done. So there are some challenges with going with this method. There have been other methods where they've used birth control. Obviously, that's not going to reduce your population. It will, in most instances, help eliminate it from growing, but you can't verify that you've tagged all the animals unless, because they can do a tranquilizer where they just dart the animal, give it a shot, and it will now no longer be able to get pregnant. Often this scenario isn't necessarily the greatest, because you can't make sure that you are targeting 100% of the animals. The only way you can do that is capture each one, mark it with an ear tag, and then give it its shot. And it's very difficult, and depending on the population that you're dealing with and how comfortable they are moving around urban areas, that can make it also challenging as well. So depredation is always a challenge. Cities are always coming up with different ways to try to reduce it, and ultimately the only way to do it is just by removing the animals. Now, you could pay for the state to come in, but oftentimes you're looking at two, three, four, $5,000 per animal, and depending on how many animals, you determine whether it's cost effective or not. Oftentimes, it's not very cost effective to move these. And then when you are darting and tranquilizing these animals, it makes you've got some concerns there about whether they're fit for human consumption. There is a half life, and how long does it take for these drugs to leave the system can also prove challenging. So if you have a hunt going on, then you don't necessarily want to be darting and moving a bunch of animals. But this will continue to be a bigger and bigger problem as these urban areas start to expand outwards, and they push these deer or moose or whatever it may be, coyotes, into these corners where they can no longer get out of, and then they just say, you know what, we're going to adapt and we're going to deal with it. And so there are cities like this, even smaller ones. I dealt with a very small city, population of like 200 people, and they themselves had what they called a deer problem. Now, there was roughly only 5 deer coming into a nursery, and it was the nursery that had the problem, not necessarily the city. But when you're a small town, everybody wants to help everybody out, and so we've done deer removals in there as well. And this is again is challenging, no matter how small or how large the city is that you're helping. All right, you guys, have a great day. Stay wild.